Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. We welcome you to our online teaching academy, Ekalaiva. Now we'll move on to the lesson, The Portrait of a Lady, Part 2, written by Khushwant Singh of Class 11 Cbse. The years rolled by. We saw less of each other. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, the world being around, etc. So as the years rolled by, as the years passed in the city, they saw less of each other. Their interaction reduced. For some time, she continued to wake him up and get him ready for school. When the author came back home, she would ask him what the teacher had taught him that day. And the author would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning. And the law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, and the world being around, etc. This made her unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and the scriptures. One day I announced that we were being given music lessons. She was very disturbed. To her, music had lewd associations. This made her unhappy. The scientific terminology and English words made her unhappy. She could not help the narrator with his lessons as she did not know the language. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed, worried. She was worried that there was no teaching about God and the scriptures. One day I announced that we were being given music lessons. She was very disturbed. To her, music had lewd associations. When she came to know that he was getting music lessons, it disturbed her. According to her, music was indecent. It was the monopoly of helots and beggars, and not meant for gentle folk. She said nothing, but a silence meant disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. When I went up to university, I was given a room of my own. The common link of friendship was snapped. My grandmother accepted a seclusion with resignation. So according to her, music was indecent. And it was the monopoly of helots and beggars. Monopoly is associated, either associated with helots. Here is prostitutes. Prostitutes and beggars, and not meant for gentle folk, people of noble birth. She said nothing, but a silence meant disapproval. She rarely talked to him after that. When he went to university for further studies, he was given a room of his own. The common link of friendship was snapped. Snapped here is break suddenly. The common link of his friendship with his grandmother was changed now, and thus his friendship with her ended. My grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignation. Resignation here is accepting her loneliness with a lot of understanding. Accepting her loneliness with a lot of understanding. She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel spinning and reciting prayers. Only in the afternoon she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. While she sat in the veranda breaking the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirrupings. She rarely left her spinning wheel, so she spent her whole day spinning wheel. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel spinning and reciting prayers. And only in the afternoon, she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. While she sat in the veranda breaking the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds gathered around her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirrupings. Here it is, bedlam is confusion. Chirrupings, the noise of a small bird. So a veritable bedlam of chirrupings is a noise and confusion caused by the chirrupings of the sparrows. Some came and perched on her legs, others on her shoulders, some even sat on her head. She smiled but never shooed them away. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day for her. When I decided to go abroad for further studies, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age one could never tell. So some came and perched on her legs, others on her shoulders, and some even sat on her head. So the birds would gather around her. Some sat near her, some on her shoulders, and a few on her head. She smiled at the sparrows but never shooed them away. And it was the happiest half an hour of the day for her. When the author decided to go abroad for further studies, he was sure that his grandmother would be upset. So he was to remain away for 5 years. A 5-year period was quite a long time. The narrator had a genuine doubt whether she would live for those 5 years to receive him again. But my grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave me at the railway station, but did not talk or show any emotion. Her lips moved in prayer. Her mind was lost in prayer. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. Silently she kissed my forehead, and when I left I cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the lost sign of physical contact between us. But my grandmother could. The author says that she did not get disturbed. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave him at the railway station, but did not talk or show any emotion, and her lips moved in prayer. Her mind was lost in prayer. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. Silently she kissed his forehead, and when I left I cherished. Cherished here is holding something, hold something dear. So the poet cherished the moist here is wet, moist impression of the kiss on forehead given by his grandmother, thinking that it might be the lost physical contact between him and his grandmother. But that was not so. After 5 years, I came back home and was met by her at the station. She did not look a day older. She still had no time for words. And while she clasped me in her arms, I could hear her reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with the sparrows, whom she fed longer and with frivolous rebukes. But that was not so. The narrator had a doubt whether she would live for those 5 years to receive him again. But after 5 years, when the author returned back home, she came to the railway station to receive him. She did not look a day older. She still had no time for words. And while she clasped here is to hold something or someone tightly. While she clasped him in her arms, the author could hear her reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of his arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer, and with frivolous rebukes. Here, frivolous rebukes here is light-hearted scoldings. She would scold the sparrows lovingly. In the evening, a change came over her. She did not pray. She collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum, and started to sing. For several hours, she thumped the sagging skins of the dilapidated drum and sang of the homecoming of warriors. We had to persuade her to stop to avoid overstraining. That was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. In the evening, a change came over her. Okay. She did not pray. Instead, she collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum and started to sing. And for several hours, she thumped. Thumped here is hit. Hit the sagging skins of the dilapidated drum. Sagging skins here is hanging down. The of the dilapidated drum is old withered drum. Old withered drum. And she sang the song of homecoming of warriors. The whole family persuaded her to stop as she might get ill due to overstraining. And it was for the first time that she had forgotten to pray. The next morning she was taken ill. It was a mild fever and the doctor told us that it would go. But my grandmother thought differently. She told us that her end was near. She said that since only a few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life she had omitted to pray. She was not going to waste any more time talking to us. We protested, but she ignored our protest. The next morning, she fell ill and it was a mild fever. The doctor assured them that there was nothing to worry. She took it differently. According to her, she would die soon as her end was near. She had omitted to pray and she did not want to waste her last hours talking to anyone in the family. The family protested, tried to stop her, but she ignored their protest. She lay peacefully in bed and telling her beads. Even before we could suspect, her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. A peaceful pallor spread on her face and we knew that she was dead. We lifted her off the bed and, as is customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. She lay peacefully in bed praying and telling her beads. She did not want to waste her last hours. She spent her last hours in reciting her prayers, laying on the bed and telling her beads, counting the beads in her rosary. And even before they could suspect, her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. A peaceful pallor spread on her face. Pallor here is an unhealthy pale appearance. A peaceful pallor spread on her face and she was dead. And they lifted her off the bed and, as is customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. Shroud is a piece of cloth used to wrap a dead person. After a few hours of mourning, we left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. In the evening, we went to her room with a crude stretcher to take her to be cremated. The sun was setting and had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. We stopped halfway in the courtyard. After a few hours of mourning, they left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. And in the evening, they went to her room with a crude stretcher. Here, crude stretcher is roughly made. Roughly made a stretcher to take her to be cremated. Cremated here dispose a dead person's body by burning. And the sun was setting and it had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. And they stopped halfway in the courtyard. Over the veranda and in a room right up to where she lay dead and stiff wrapped in the red shroud, thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. There was no chirruping. We felt sorry for the birds and my mother fetched some bread for them. All over the veranda and in a room right up where she lay dead, thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. There was no chirruping. They did not chirrup. There was complete silence. We felt sorry for the birds. They felt sorry for the birds and the narrator's mother fetched some bread for the. She broke it into little crumbs, the way my grandmother used to, and threw it to them. The sparrows took no notice of the bread. When we carried my grandmother's corpse off, they flew away quietly. Next morning, the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. The author's mother tried to feed the sparrows by breaking the bread into little crumbs. The sparrows took no notice of the bread. They did not want to eat. When they carried the grandmother's corpse off, they flew away quietly. Next morning, the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. They did not want to eat, but were mourning the death of the one who fed them for so many days. Thank you, children. I hope you understood and enjoyed this lesson.